The global spotlight returning to China. A secret directive from Beijing on pneumonia reporting, bringing its medical transparency into question yet again. Undiagnosed pneumonia with unusual symptoms. How does the current outbreak in China compare to COVID-19? A look at expert insights. An influence memo from the Chinese Communist Party exposed by U.S. lawmakers. How do the regime's tactics operate in America? And Washington has promised a new round of mid-range missiles to the Indo-Pacific region next year. Officials say the weapons will keep Beijing's forces away from Taiwan. What do you think? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A replay of the COVID-19 pandemic's earliest days. China's mysterious pneumonia outbreak is raging across the nation and bringing back some unwelcome memories. That's alongside a lingering question, is Beijing's lack of medical transparency still causing issues? Here's an exclusive scoop shared by an insider from the country's top leadership.
As a mysterious wave of pneumonia cases rages through China, the communist regime's top officials have been given a secret directive: downplay the current outbreak and avoid using the term COVID-19. The order coming straight from the Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping. That's according to an insider with knowledge of the top echelons of the Chinese Communist Party. We gave her a pseudonym out of safety concerns.
Major foreign media outlets stationed in Beijing also received the order, which makes it clear that no interviews are allowed to report on the so-called mycoplasma pneumonia infections or influenza. Domestic media are also prohibited from making any comprehensive reports on this outbreak. That is just like pretending this never happened.
She adds authorities have been ordered by Xi to refer to the outbreaks of serious respiratory disease as mycoplasma pneumonia infections, or as other infections that are not COVID-19, such as influenza. She also reveals multiple Chinese hospitals have set up makeshift clinics to cope with the surging demand for treatment. Such facilities are most known for large-scale medical isolation tactics used during the COVID-19 pandemic in China.
The affiliated hospital of Hebei University has one makeshift clinic, and Baoding First Central Hospital has one. They are the only two hospitals. The affiliated hospital of Hebei University's makeshift clinic is already put into use, primarily for children receiving IV drop treatments.
That's as pneumonia infections quickly spread from children to adults, overwhelming hospitals across China. Reports of the illness first poured in from major cities in northern China, including Beijing and Tianjin. Northern Liaoning province is also grappling with high case numbers. Now the infections are spreading through 3 southern Chinese provinces. Here's what a resident from Shanghai had to say.
It's very bad now. The child is sick. Basically, all the fever wards are full, and the same is true for Shanghai Pediatric Hospital.
Another resident said the cases in Jiangsu are also getting serious.
Here in Jiangsu, in my city, there are indeed a lot of sick people, both adults and children. Take my family as an example. We have a total of 6 members in our family, and a third of us have been infected.
And in Guangdong, a resident shared a similar situation.
Now infection cases are appearing in Guangzhou, too. There are a lot of children who are sick. I suspect that it's COVID-19. The symptoms are too similar.
It's the first full winter without a COVID-19 lockdown in China. Yet scenes of overwhelmed hospitals and hazmat workers disinfecting streets are still unfolding in the country. We'll keep you updated as the situation develops.
Undiagnosed pneumonia with unusual symptoms. What should we expect from China's rising infection cases? And what can we learn given the communist regime's lack of transparency? We sat down with Dr. Sean Lin, former U.S. Army microbiologist and professor of biomedical sciences at Feitian College, to dive deeper into the situation. Why do you think it's so common in children this time?
I think this is a very unique situation. I actually think the fundamental underlying reason is still the COVID. The COVID never really left China, and it's still a COVID pandemic. And then on top of it, you see very high peak circulation of other respiratory pathogens. So for example, if you have the Mycoplasma pneumonia infection, which target primarily to people's upper respiratory tract and children's, very easy to contract these Mycoplasma pneumonia infection. Your immune system is weakened, and now the COVID can easily enter directly invaded to your lung, like causing more infection, causing more inflammatory infiltration, and causing the white lung situation.
Given the Chinese Communist Party's history of lack of transparency and underreporting in at least, the most recent pandemic, how can we be sure about what's actually happening inside China right now?
Very obviously, the Chinese government did not report any of those death tolls, ICU number, hospitalization number. And so right now, people can only guess the severity of these outbreaks through in the hospital. You have to register for a number, right? So some hospital, even the children's hospital, you have to wait 3,000 people in order to get treated, right? People can only count the numbers through these kind of registration system. It's kind of ridiculous. So Chinese people are not even entitled to know what's the outbreak situation in any particular city. And the Chinese government say they provide testing data to WHO. But on the other hand, why Chinese people are not entitled to these simple testing data, right? It's all ridiculous. So the Chinese government is still hiding the situation.
Now let's turn to defense. Starting next year, Washington will deploy a fresh round of mid-range missiles to the Indo-Pacific region. And the goal is to make sure that China doesn't invade Taiwan. U.S. Army Pacific Command General Charles Flynn said that the deployment will include land-based Tomahawks, which are capable of locating and striking targets from roughly 1,500 miles away. Flynn warned that the regime's military capability is expanding at an unprecedented pace under Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and that China's trajectory would prove a dangerous one for both the Indo-Pacific and the world. For decades, the Chinese Communist Party has seen Taiwan as part of its own territory and has vowed to take it by force if necessary. That's despite never having ruled it. As Beijing continues to ramp up aggression beyond its border, Flynn said that many countries in the Indo-Pacific are looking to work closely with the U.S. forces. Meanwhile, over the weekend, the Chinese military got into a verbal dispute with the U.S. Navy in the South China Sea. This came as a U.S. vessel sailed near the Paracel Islands, a disputed chain of reefs claimed by China, Taiwan, and Vietnam. Beijing soon mobilized its forces to, quote, track, monitor, and warn away the destroyer. In response, the U.S. Navy confirmed the passage, saying that the act was protected under international law. Worth noting, U.S. forces have been routinely operating in the South China Sea for more than a century. Despite the territorial dispute, China is the only nation that exercises military control over the Paracel Islands. Shifting gears, a defense update from Asia-Pacific. For the first time, South Korea will join NATO's cyber coalition. It's one of the world's largest cyber defense exercises. The drills will simulate cyber attacks against critical infrastructure, and defenders from 34 countries will train to counter the attacks. They'll also practice recovering control of key systems. The exercises are happening both in Estonia and remotely through Friday. 11 military officials from South Korea are taking part as the country deepens its ties with NATO. And moving to North America, Canada's top spy agency says the Chinese regime is trying to recruit government workers and academics in the country. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, or CSIS, sent out alerts to government workers earlier this month. It warned them that the Chinese regime is using a large-scale email campaign to lure Canadians into Chinese talent programs. CSIS warns the programs can result in the loss of Canadian resources and sensitive information. The Canadian spy agency also says the Chinese Communist regime is leveraging such recruitment programs for espionage. The Chinese Communist Party spreads its influence around the globe using something former leader Mao Zedong called a magic weapon for success. Today, U.S. lawmakers detailed how it operates. NTD's Arian Pastar takes a closer look.
China's United Front Work Department pushes the CCP's evil ideology in the U.S. and around the globe. On Tuesday, the Select Committee on the CCP published a bipartisan memo saying Chinese dictator Mao Zedong described United Front work as a magic weapon for the party's success. The CCP used it during the 1960s in its Cultural Revolution, which killed tens of millions of people. United Front work contains activities that aim to pressure, threaten, and attack individuals, companies, governments, and more, so that they align with CCP interests. Nowadays, these activities even take place in the United States. Earlier this year, multiple pro-China protesters interrupted a congressional hearing that focused on the CCP's United Front work.
The biggest threat to this country and the world, we need to...
I think these eruptions are indicative of really the effect that the United Front Work Department has had. They reinforce, I think, the idea that America is the problem in the world, and only if America disengages, or in this case becomes more passive, that things will get better.
Another example of United Front work in the US are alleged Chinese police stations, which actually serve as spy posts for the CCP, like the one in Manhattan that made headlines earlier this year. Another example of United Front work in the US took place earlier this year when Taiwan's president visited the United States. The CCP told organizations in California and in New York to go protest Taiwan's leader during her visit. Now, of course, people have the right to protest. But what if tensions between China and the US keep rising? What if a war breaks out? It's not clear how the CCP might use its outposts in the United States in such a scenario. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Meanwhile, in Canada, several top universities in Quebec have imposed a WeChat ban on all school-owned devices. This comes just days after the nation barred the social media app from all government networks, citing cybersecurity concerns. McGill University was the first to take action, then Concordia tagged along within a few days. The two schools urged students to use discretion and try not to access university data if they have WeChat installed on their cell phones or computers.
I think it is the right move. It has the full access to many files on the device, location, camera, microphone, or even able to detect nearby devices. This is a privacy concern.
WeChat was developed by Chinese multimedia conglomerate Tencent. It now has more than 1 billion users globally, most of them from mainland China. From chit-chatting to utilities payments to grocery shopping, the app has become a catch-all for its users. Despite its popularity, the U.S. and its allied nations have long expressed concerns over WeChat's data collection policies.
It allows third party to develop application on top of WeChat. The third party can be Chinese government. So it's very difficult to guarantee security on this type of app.
In August 2020, former President Trump signed an executive order seeking to take WeChat off the U.S. App Store for good. The Biden administration revoked that decision and instead called for additional scrutiny of apps tied to foreign adversaries like China. Now, some updates on China's economy. Beijing is trying to hold on to foreign business, while Western companies are looking for ways to reduce their dependency on China's supply chains. On Tuesday, Premier Li Qiang said China is willing to build closer ties with all countries. He made the comment during the China International Supply Chain Expo, China's first ever expo of this nature. Right now, foreign investment in China is at a historic low. Businesses like Apple are moving chunks of their manufacturing to other Asian countries. That's over fears like tensions between Beijing and Washington, tightening regulations in China, and an unfair playing field compared to Chinese state-owned companies. The de-risking process started quietly in 2018 after the Trump administration imposed trade tariffs on Beijing, and later became a trend after the pandemic hit China's economy hard. Many foreign companies operating in China say market demand in the country hasn't returned to pre-COVID levels. What's more, new troubles are on the horizon for China's financial sector. Beijing police launched a probe investigating one of China's biggest financial conglomerates, ZEG. The wealth management company told investors last week that it's severely insolvent, citing $64 billion in debt. Experts predict investors may lose at least 3/4 of their money. The news is fueling concerns that China's real estate crisis is spilling over into the financial sector. 3 out of the 4 of China's biggest property developers are buried under massive debt, to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars for each of them. ZEG has had sizable exposure to the real estate sector. Beijing authorities suspect the company of, quote, illegal crimes, but haven't elaborated. Back to real estate, a new lawsuit against Chinese company Evergrande. This time, the plaintiff is a subsidiary of Evergrande, a company called Jingbi Property. The case is related to about $280 million of guarantees Jingbi Property gave a bank. That bank later seized the assets. Jingbi Property believes it happened due to a malfunction within the parent company Evergrande and a few others. Over to the fashion industry, clothing company SHEIN is gearing up to enter the American stock market. It's expected to list as early as next year. The fast fashion brand has already filed to go public in the United States. And 3 leading institutions in the financial sector have been hired on the company's initial public offering, or IPO. The company was founded in China, later moving its headquarters to Singapore. It's valued at more than $60 billion. But its business model has been at the center of industry controversy. SHEIN partners with clothing makers inside China and sells those products through its online store in other countries. The United States is one of its biggest markets. The brand ships its goods directly to shoppers in individually addressed packages, avoiding both warehouse fees and U.S. import taxes, allowing it to offer customers dirt-cheap prices. SHEIN is also facing a series of claims, from stealing copyrighted designs to using cotton from Xinjiang made with forced labor. Xinjiang is home to the Uyghur ethnic minority. Washington says at least 1 million Uyghurs have been put in forced labor camps under the Chinese Communist regime. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than 2 years. If you'd like to support us, subscribe to our partner platform, Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Or consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus. Here's what to look out for in our second half: another standoff in the South China Sea as Washington asserts its rights in international waters. Concerns over China's naval power and aggression are front and center. Could Beijing's sheer numbers overtake the American tech edge in a fight? And is the world stage inching closer to a kinetic war? For details, we spoke to Brent Stadler, a senior research fellow for naval warfare and advanced technology in the Center for National Defense at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.